Initially, when we talked, I said, well, I'm not an artist and I didn't create art. And then last night, I thought, well, although I'm not an artist, the documentary and the virtual museum were, in a sense, art, manifestations of art. Because when you think about art, or when I think about art, and I'm no expert, the thought is, what does art in general do? What's the possibility of art in Syracuse? And so, since I've been here for a couple of decades now, I think that what art does, can do, and does in Syracuse is it tells untold stories. It expands people's sense of what they believe is true. It provides kind of this multiple way of looking at one story. And so what we did in creating this documentary is we told a more fuller story about I-81, in essence. I-81 was presented politically as a progressive move for the city of Syracuse. But progressive for whom? And over time, what we saw was that, or what we learned, we being Syracuse University, myself as an employee of Syracuse University, was that I-81 disrupted a potentially very vibrant black community, right? Black American community. And why I say potentially very vibrant is because there were, store owners, people who owned their own businesses, a vibrant social life, and probably, I would venture to say, a burgeoning political kind of coherence, if you will. And over the long run, what that has done is it has actually impacted the entire city of Syracuse. So this disruption impacted and in the long run cost the city of Syracuse more. Why do I say that? Because one, especially sociologists would say that this disruption of that community has contributed to poverty that we see now, especially on the South Side, that the crime that we see in the community. So I think what we did, unbeknownst to us, was we helped tell a fuller story. So our video, our documentary, our virtual museum helped tell a fuller story, and so that was art in its, for us, in its fullest expression. I know that this question is meant for artists and their, kind of what they're going to do artistically or what they would like to see artistically. But I love this question because as a non-artist, I can go beyond my boundary of the video and the virtual museum. And so the question made me think about what would feel right in Syracuse in a space like that. And for me personally, and for probably a lot of people like me who are imports to Syracuse in a sense, is something like very bright. So of course I want to see the videos incorporated, the documentary, and I'll get to that in a moment. But let me start by saying that generally speaking, I see it as a very bright, well-lit, vibrant space, because Syracuse is rather gloomy, and especially in the winter and in the evening. And so anything that can kind of bring light, both literally and kind of metaphorically to Syracuse would be a good thing. The other thing I thought about is I love the concept of multiple forms of art expression, and even the use of mixed media. So just as a kind of almost instinctual response, I saw like metal, wood, and silk being used in some type of structure. I saw sculpture, in addition to the videos, and videos about dance, and this kind of, if you will, this kind of global village. I know that's used a lot, and I don't mean to sound trite, like, you know, we're all going to hold hands and sing Kumbaya, but this kind of capturing multiple art forms to create one piece, whatever. So I don't have artistic words to use because I'm not an artist and I'm not a designer and I'm not an architect. So you'll have to kind of bear with me and maybe even interpret this in your own professional language. But I do see something that is relatively well lit, expansive, addresses multiple groups, especially underscore young people in the city of Syracuse, and young people especially from underrepresented groups. So I'm thinking, to be specific, I'm thinking of young African Americans, or young people in all of these categories: African Americans, Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, newly arrived Asians, newly arrived Africans, Muslims, Buddhists, and Hindus, right? So I those in essence, in my view of being back here now for 23 years, is those are representatives of underrepresented groups. And I would like to see interviews of young people representing those groups about just the existence of I-81, what vision they may have, but also just general questions about, their lives in Syracuse, because we've already done, at least the elderly and the Black American community, and my vision is that one piece of this multi-layered art installation under I-81 would be a collage of interviews between, like that kind of juxtaposes the young and the old in a very, very interesting kind of way. I've been back in Syracuse for 23 years, working only for Syracuse University. I was recruited back to Syracuse in 1990. I say back because I'm an alum. I was here as an undergraduate and graduate in the 70s through early 80s, and then left, went home, which is New York, and came back here in 1990 on an 18-month contract. This is the longest 18-month contract, but so I've been here for 23 years, and I've only worked in Syracuse for Syracuse University. I was charged about 9 years ago with the responsibility for looking at how Syracuse University might engage the Southside community, and that's all my charge was. So from that very thankfully broad charge, we were able to create various types of projects and programs to help revitalize the Southside community. My work actually is to work with a not-for-profit grassroots community organization that I founded in order to be actually most efficient and effective on the South Side. And it's an organization primarily of young adults, young people, who, for the most part, live or lived on the South Side, for the most part are professional, and all have an interest in revitalizing the area. We had the Eat to Live food co-op, which we just opened, and it is both socially charged and community driven because the area is a food desert. And the people in the area, many of whom are on public assistance, have not been able to, for multiple reasons, made decisions about some very basic things in their lives, like where they live, because if you're on public assistance, you have Section 8 housing, so you have to live in certain houses. And that dictates pretty much where you're going to buy your food and where your kids are going to go to school, because there's a convenience factor there too, and what kind of food you can even buy off of food stamps, what's not called food stamps anymore. So the food co-op is an opportunity that will probably take a long time for people to take advantage of, but it's an opportunity for people to become member owners of something and therefore start making decisions again about something very, very basic in their lives, like what food you're going to buy and eat. So I kind of Googled it and saw that some graduate students had done a paper probably 5 or more years ago, maybe even longer than that, on I-81. And that's when I came to realize that I-81 currently takes up 20% of the city's kind of footprint, if you will. And that in 2017, we're scheduled, I knew this part, but scheduled for either demolition or repair, and that repair, if it's done according to architectural and design and whatever transportation principles are needed, that it would even expand that footprint. The impact on the health of the kids or the people that live in pioneer homes and the bricks, which is the public housing, is incredible. I mean, it is the highest, they have the highest incidence of asthma, especially the kids, in the city of Syracuse and maybe even the county. I'm not quite sure about that, but it's probably the county as well. And it's not just asthma, there's other respiratory ailments. So there is a health benefit to removing I-81 in addition to the property and business development and housing and mixed income housing, which is absolutely needed. I mean, ghettos of just poor people just can't exist in a city if a city is going to thrive. So there's this kind of mixed income housing that's needed. But really what people rarely talk about is the health impact of all those fumes and the exhaust from the cars on the kids that grow up in that area. In the summer of 2005, I talked to residents of the South Side, specifically in the heart of the South Side. When I say the South Side, I'm not talking about the Valley. People define the South Side in whatever way is most lucrative for them. So if you're going to get something from saying you live on the South Side and you really live in the Valley, you say you live on the South Side because it's the southern quadrant of Syracuse. When I say the South Side, I'm talking about, and when I say the heart of the South Side, I'm talking about the areas around, of course, South Ave, Midland, South Salina, State Street, and then from maybe where Townsend is, in a sense, a little closer to Newell Avenue. And the heart of that is around South Salina and Colvin. So I was talking to people who lived in those areas, and when I began, most of them were the elders in the community. And I met with them a couple of times a week for hours each time during the entire summer of 2005. So from when we consider summer in the academic year, from May to August. So I talked to them, and one of the themes that kept coming up was that the young people in the community have no idea how socially vibrant and economically more independent, I wouldn't say fully independent, but more independent, the black community, because it wasn't on the South Side then, but the black community, they believed that if young people really understood how the black community used to be, that they would see the possibility that these young people would some of them might see the possibilities of the future, of changing their impoverished condition or their hopeless behavior. So initially they wanted a museum, an actual physical museum. But, and so my role was to provide as much information as I could on what it would take to develop a museum. I believed that that wasn't cost effective, it wasn't sustainable, but that wasn't, my role wasn't to tell them, you can't do this. My role was to say, Syracuse University isn't going to pay for something like this. This is how much it would cost per year to maintain it. This is how much it would cost to build it. This is the state of the art now in this country with museums. There's a move away from these kind of small, supporting small, little museums. So we moved into, we want to do a virtual museum, but the community really has issues regarding trusting Syracuse University because of past engagement, which was just to do research, from them, and then tell them what they already know after the research is done, how messed up it really is over here. So we had to build trust, and in order to build trust, what was decided, I decided that we needed to have a group of people, and these were elders, so it was different than the coalition, which were mostly young people. The Black History Preservation Project team were mostly elders, and it also included, a couple of professionals from SU and from Onondaga Historical Association, and they got together to think about how we would begin to develop this virtual museum. But trust kept becoming kind of an obstacle. Mistrust of the community became an obstacle. So it was decided not by myself, but actually by a team member to have a bus tour with the elders. And I thought that was a great idea, but I thought, more than just a bus tour with having them reminisce, we should have it taped, and we should create a documentary from it. And that's what we did, and the documentary was a tremendous hit, was shown several times at different venues, Syracuse Stage, the Palace Theater, Art Rage, and that actually did work in terms of gaining people's trust, so that when we told them, we're not going to keep your pictures, we're going to just digitize them on the spot and give them right back to you, people believed that that's what we were going to do. So the 2 digital history fairs that we had, people actually came out to share their stories, shared their photographs, and we had the first iteration of the virtual museum. So that's kind of the story about the documentary and how it related to the Our Stories virtual museum. And the address for Our Stories is ourstories.syr.edu.